The neon lights flickered in perfect synchrony with the pulsating rhythm of the arena's soundtrack, casting an ethereal glow over the thousands of spectators who filled the colossal structure. Outside, the sky hung heavy with dark clouds, the kind that threatened rain but never seemed to deliver. But inside there was no weather, just the controlled chaos of a futuristic gladiatorial spectacle where every fight was a battle for glory, honor, and survival. At the center of the arena, a massive fighting ring lay illuminated by an array of holographic projectors, shimmering with vibrant blues, reds, and greens. Above it, a floating banner displayed the title of the event in massive letters, the Apex Battle Royale. It was a championship tournament, the culmination of months of fierce competition, where only the strongest and most skilled fighters stood a chance at victory. And tonight, the star of the event was none other than Sera the Fury Valens. The crowd roared as the announcement was made, a swell of excitement that could be felt deep in the bones of every spectator. Sera was a legend in this world, a fighting machine whose combination of speed, strength, and intelligence had earned her the title of champion. She was the reigning queen of the arena, undefeated in the league for 3 years, and the crowd adored her. Fans screamed her name, waved banners with her image, and chanted her title, as if to summon her presence. Sera stood backstage, the sound of the crowd's enthusiasm reaching her ears even before her entrance. Her back was straight, her breathing slow and controlled as she prepared herself mentally for the match ahead. A few other fighters lingered in the corridors, eyeing her with a mix of admiration and fear. Sera knew that they saw her as a monster, a force of nature. It didn't matter if they liked her or not. In this arena, it was respect she demanded, and fear. She ran her fingers over the cold metal of her combat armor, adjusting the various settings. The black, sleek suit molded to her body, offering both protection and the kind of fluid agility that made her nearly unstoppable. Her visor glowed faintly, and the HUD displayed real-time data on her opponent's fighting style, their weaknesses, and their previous matches. Nothing could shake her resolve. She was ready. "Sera," a voice cut through her thoughts, and she turned to see her manager Gage standing by the doorway with a grin. "The crowd's ready for you. They're going insane out there. This is going to be another classic." "Yeah," Sera said with a smirk, her voice low and confident. "But they don't know what they're in for tonight." Gage raised an eyebrow. "You're always so calm. I don't get it. How do you stay so steady before every match?" Sera shrugged, her expression unreadable beneath the visor. "It's simple. I'm the best. I don't need to be nervous about something I already own." Gage chuckled, shaking his head. "Cocky as always. All right, let's go show them why they call you the Fury." With a final nod, Sera stepped toward the entrance ramp, the roar of the crowd growing louder with each passing second. The moment she emerged onto the floor, the arena exploded in a cacophony of cheers. Fans screamed her name, waving signs and banners that read, "All hail the Fury," and "You undefeated." Sera's heart beat in rhythm with the excitement. This was her element, the arena, the energy, the power. She raised her arm in acknowledgement, a calm smile on her face as the spotlight bathed her in a brilliant white light. Her reputation preceded her, and she knew that every fighter in the back was watching, studying, and waiting for their turn to challenge her. But no one had succeeded before. And tonight, she wasn't planning on giving anyone the chance to. As she entered the ring, her boots made a soft thud against the metallic floor, the sound drowned out by the cheers of the crowd. Her combat suit hissed as the system activated, recalibrating her strength and agility to maximum levels. The announcer's voice boomed throughout the stadium. "Ladies and gentlemen, the undefeated, the unstoppable, the one and only Sera Valens, the Fury." The crowd went wild as she stepped into the center of the ring, her presence commanding the attention of every spectator. She took a deep breath, exhaling slowly, and began to stretch in preparation, her movements fluid and controlled. But something was off tonight. There was an unusual energy in the air, an odd tension. As the lights dimmed slightly, signaling the beginning of the match, the audience grew even more restless. They were waiting for something, or someone. Suddenly the crowd's intensity shifted. They began murmuring, voices growing louder and more curious. At first Sera thought it was just the usual pre-fight jitters, but there was something else in the air, a sense of anticipation, but not for her, for someone else. Then, out of the darkness, a figure emerged, a young man. The crowd's confusion was palpable as they began whispering among themselves. He was barely more than a teenager, his face still youthful, his frame lithe and unassuming, but there was something about the way he moved that immediately captured attention. His steps were light, almost effortless, his posture confident, yet there was an air of calm about him, something that didn't match the frenetic energy of the arena. Sera's heart skipped a beat. She had been expecting a seasoned fighter, someone who might challenge her skills. But this kid? She had never seen him before. There were no records, no footage of his previous fights. His sudden appearance felt like a calculated move, a disruption to her carefully constructed world. The announcer hesitated, scanning his screen in disbelief. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a surprise for all of us. We have a newcomer entering the ring tonight. Please welcome Kai Voss." The name hung in the air, but no one reacted at first. The crowd was still trying to process the situation. A kid challenging the champion? It made no sense. Sera took a step back, observing him closely. He wore no combat armor, only a tight-fitting bodysuit that suggested incredible flexibility. No weapons, no enhancements. Just a teenager with an almost unsettling calm in his eyes. She couldn't figure him out. How was he here? What was his angle? Her instincts told her to be wary, but her pride refused to back down. Whoever this boy was, he wasn't going to walk in and make a mockery of her reign. Not tonight, not on her turf. "Let's see what you've got, kid," she muttered under her breath, her body tensing in anticipation. Kai stepped forward into the ring, his eyes never leaving Sera's. The crowd quieted, all eyes now fixed on him, their skepticism hanging thick in the air. He didn't seem bothered by it. His calm demeanor was almost unsettling. He raised a hand, acknowledging the crowd with a single wave. His voice, when he finally spoke, was quiet but full of purpose. "I'm not here to impress anyone. I'm here to fight." That was it. No flashy entrance, no boastful claims. Just those 5 words, and then he took his stance in the center of the ring, waiting for Sera to make her move. The bell rang, and the fight began. Sera wasted no time. She charged at him with all the speed and power she could muster, her every movement a blur. Her fist came down hard, aiming for Kai's chest. A direct hit would knock him out cold, but to her surprise, Kai was already moving. He dodged. Sera blinked, not sure how he had managed to sidestep her strike without even breaking a sweat. She launched another attack. A swift knee aimed at his midsection, but once again Kai danced out of the way, his movements fluid and calculated. He wasn't fast, he wasn't strong, he didn't need to be. Sera could feel in her bones. This kid wasn't fighting like anyone she'd ever faced before. He wasn't reacting to her attacks. He was anticipating them, reading her every movement like a book. Frustration built inside Sera. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. She was the best. She couldn't lose to someone like him. And then, without warning, Kai made his move. He didn't rush at her, didn't try to overpower her. He simply closed the distance between them in a single, fluid motion, faster than her eyes could track. Before she even had time to react, he was behind her, his hand pressing lightly to the back of her neck. The crowd gasped as Sera's body froze, every muscle locking in place, her vision blurred, her mind raced, her body was paralyzed. Kai let her fall gently to the ground, his hands never leaving her. And then, just as quickly as the fight had begun, it was over. The arena fell into a stunned silence. Sera lay on the ground, her chest rising and falling rapidly, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Her heart was still racing, but this time it wasn't from excitement. It was from pure, unrelenting shock. She had been beaten by a kid in a single move. Kai stood above her, his face soft but serious. He offered her a hand. "You fought well," he said simply. The crowd remained silent for what felt like an eternity. Then, as if finally realizing what they had just witnessed, they exploded in a mixture of shock, awe, and disbelief. Sera had been dethroned by Kai Voss. The fight had ended in a silence that felt too deep, too profound to be real. The crowd, once roaring with anticipation and now stunned into submission, had yet to fully process what they had just witnessed. Sera, the undefeated champion, the one they had all placed their hopes in, had been dethroned by a single, seemingly effortless strike from a nameless challenger. It was as if the very fabric of the universe had shifted in that moment, something so extraordinary, so impossible, that no one in the arena, or even in the countless watching from across the world, could quite grasp the gravity of it. But one thing was certain. Everything had changed. Kai stood over Sera, his posture calm, even relaxed, as though this was just another day at the office. His youthful face betrayed no arrogance, no triumph. Instead, he extended a hand to the woman who had ruled this world for years, his eyes soft, yet undeniably steady. "Get up," Kai said simply, his voice unwavering. "You've fought hard, but this isn't your fight anymore." Sera blinked rapidly, struggling to clear the fog that clouded her mind. She could hear the faint murmurs of the crowd, their disbelief, their questions, their disbelief at her sudden fall, but nothing could compare to the confusion swirling inside her. How, she thought, how could this have happened? She had never lost in this arena. She had built a reputation, an empire even, based on her speed, strength, and unmatched tactical mind. She had fought some of the greatest warriors the world had ever known and emerged victorious every single time. And yet, in one single moment, all that had come crashing down. Her fingers twitched as she tried to push herself up from the ground, but the strange paralysis still gripped her body. Something had happened to her, something that hadn't just affected her muscles. It had gone deeper into the very core of her being. It was as if Kai had reached into her, touched something inside her that she hadn't even known existed, and shut it off with a single, fluid movement. But there was no time to question it now. Her pride, her reputation, everything she had worked for had been shattered in the blink of an eye. A part of her wanted to resist, to push him away, to show him that she wasn't some weakling who could be taken down by a kid who looked like he had never stepped into a real fight in his life. But another part, something more primal, recognized the truth. She had been outclassed. As she reached for his outstretched hand, the feeling of helplessness settled over her, weighing down on her chest. Sera had never been one to admit defeat, but in that moment, she had no choice. When her fingers brushed against his, something shifted again. There was a strange warmth in the contact, an unexpected kindness that for a fleeting second cracked the walls she had built around herself. But it was gone before she could process it, replaced by the crushing weight of realization. The crowd was starting to stir, their voices rising in a crescendo of astonishment. The announcer, his voice trembling, finally broke the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've just witnessed the impossible. Kai Voss, an unranked, unknown fighter, has just defeated the reigning champion, Sera the Fury Valens, in a single move." The words echoed through the arena, but they barely reached Sera's ears. She wasn't listening to the crowd anymore. She was still lost in the shock of what had just occurred, of what she had just experienced. Kai helped her to her feet, and as she rose, she felt the weight of the arena's gaze on her. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw no smugness, no satisfaction, only the same calm, unwavering resolve that had been there from the very first moment he entered the ring. Kai helped her to her feet, and as she rose, she felt the weight of the arena's gaze on her. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw no smugness, no satisfaction, only the same calm, unwavering resolve that had been there from the very first moment he entered the ring. "I told you," he said softly. "This wasn't your fight anymore." Sera glared at him, her pride stinging with the words. She wanted to strike him, to show him that she was still in control, still the strongest fighter in this world. But the reality of the situation was impossible to ignore. She had been beaten, and beaten soundly, by a person who, by all accounts, shouldn't even have been there. What are you?" Sera asked, her voice sharp but full of curiosity. Kai didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned his gaze to the crowd, which had slowly begun to react, their shock giving way to an overwhelming sense of awe. They weren't sure whether to cheer or boo, their emotions caught between admiration for the impossible feat and the sadness of witnessing their champion's downfall. But then, as if sensing the shift in the atmosphere, Kai spoke again. "I'm just a fighter," he said simply, his tone still calm but firm. "And I'm not here for your applause. I'm here to show you that there's more to strength than what you've come to understand. What Sera Valens represents is a single kind of power, a power that's rooted in physical ability and brutal force. But that isn't the only kind of power that exists in the world." His words carried weight, more than they should have. It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't some grand speech. It was simply truth, and Sera felt it in her bones as he spoke. The crowd, still reeling from the spectacle, hung on his every word. They didn't know who this kid was or why he had decided to challenge the most dominant force in the arena, but something about him, something in his voice, made them believe him. Sera, however, wasn't so easily convinced. She turned her gaze from the crowd and fixed it firmly on Kai. "You've got a lot of nerve, showing up here with no name, no history, and making a mockery of everything I've worked for," she growled. "You think you're some kind of savior." Kai looked back at her, unfazed. His expression softened, but his resolve remained unshaken. "I'm not trying to be a savior. I'm just showing you the truth. There's more to power than strength. More to fighting than winning every time. It's about understanding the flow of things, the way the world bends, how it can be broken." Sera's eyes narrowed as she processed his words. It didn't make sense. She had dominated for so long, and in an instant this stranger had come in and undone it all. She wanted to fight him again, to prove herself. But there was something deep inside her, a gnawing feeling that told her she wouldn't be able to beat him in a rematch. She didn't know if it was his confidence, his strange calm, or the way he seemed to understand her so easily, but it unsettled her. She needed to know more. "Who are you really?" she asked again, this time with a force that conveyed both frustration and curiosity. "How did you do that? I've fought thousands of opponents, but no one has ever." Kai sighed, his eyes flicking to the exit as though ready to leave. "I told you I'm just a fighter," he repeated. "But I've been trained to see things differently, to feel things differently." His gaze met hers again, his voice lowering. "And I've come to realize that the power you possess, it's not the only kind of power. There are others who can bend reality in ways you can't even comprehend." For the first time, Sera's breath caught in her chest. She wasn't sure if he was toying with her or if he genuinely believed what he was saying. Either way, he had made her question everything she had ever known about strength, about power. And that was something no one, no matter how skilled, had ever been able to do before. As the arena's lights shifted, signaling the end of the match, Kai turned to walk away, his figure receding into the shadows. "We'll meet again," he said over his shoulder, "when you're ready to learn more." Sera watched him go, feeling a mix of emotions swirl within her. For the first time in her career, she wasn't thinking about winning or losing. She was thinking about what lay beyond the surface of this world she had built. What other powers were out there? What other forces existed that she didn't know about? And when would she be ready to face them? The shock of what had happened lingered in Sera's chest long after the lights dimmed and the crowd began to dissipate. She had lost, and worse, she had lost in a way that she could not understand. It wasn't just her body that had failed her in the ring, it was her mind, her very perception of what it meant to be strong, to be a fighter. Everything she had based her entire career on had been upended in one single move. The arena, once deafening with excitement, now felt like an alien landscape. She had been carried backstage by a few staff members, their attempts at congratulating her falling on deaf ears. They kept saying things like, "You'll be back next time, champ," or "It was a fluke, don't worry." But none of their words mattered. None of them knew what it felt like to be broken in the way she had been. This wasn't about winning or losing. It was about something much deeper, something far more unsettling. Sera sat in the corner of the medical bay, her back against the cold steel wall, her combat armor still strapped to her body. The soft hum of the equipment around her did little to calm the raging thoughts in her head. She replayed the fight over and over, searching for an explanation, a crack in the system that would give her a way to understand what had just occurred. How did he do it? It wasn't just that Kai had beaten her. That was something every fighter had to accept at some point, that there would always be someone stronger, faster, or smarter than you. But Kai hadn't just beaten her. He had done so with an ease that she couldn't fathom. She'd felt it the moment he touched her, an unsettling stillness that took over her body, as if her very essence had been neutralized. And she still had no idea how. "Get it together," she muttered to herself, pushing off from the wall and standing up, her hands resting on her hips. She could hear the muffled sounds of the crowd outside, but it didn't matter. She had to focus on the facts. One thing was clear, she couldn't afford to let this defeat define her. Not if she wanted to keep her place in this world. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everything she had built. The empire of fans, the sponsors, the fame. If she didn't come back stronger, faster, better, she would lose it all. And that wasn't something she was willing to accept. She was snapped from her thoughts as the door to the medical bay swung open. Gage, her manager, stepped in, his expression a mix of concern and frustration. He hadn't said a word when she was carried back to the locker room, his silence weighing heavier on her than any verbal reprimand ever could. He was her closest ally, but in moments like this, he didn't know what to say. She took a seat by the bed. "You okay?" Gage asked quietly, his voice more gentle than usual. Sera gave him a half-hearted nod. "I'll be fine." He raised an eyebrow. "You don't look fine. You don't look like you've been in a fight. You look like you've had your world ripped out from under you." Sera turned away, not wanting to meet his eyes. "I don't know what happened, Gage. It's like he just paralyzed me. I've never felt anything like it. It was like he controlled my body. Like he knew exactly what I was going to do before I even thought about doing it." Gage's expression shifted from concern to something more serious, a subtle realization forming in his mind. "You think he has some kind of ability? Some tech?" "I don't know," she said, frustration creeping into her voice. "But it wasn't just his physicality. It was something else. He felt different. Something in his eyes, the way he moved. He wasn't just anticipating me, Gage. He was reading." Gage was silent for a moment, absorbing her words. "I've been in this business long enough to know that people can do incredible things when they're at the top of their game. But this doesn't make sense. You've fought some of the best in the world. You've outsmarted and outlasted people who had the best tech, the best training. But this..." Sera's head spun. "But he didn't even have any tech. He wasn't enhanced. He wasn't like anyone I've fought before. He was just a guy. And yet he was something else entirely." Gage finished for her, his voice taking on a tone of both wonder and caution. "This changes everything, Sera. If he can do that, if he can get into your head like that, you need to figure out who he really is, fast." Sera clenched her fists, her mind racing with possibilities. "I'm not going to let this go. I'll find out who he is, and when I do, I'll make sure he understands that no one beats the Fury." The following days were a blur. Sera spent hours in the gym, her body aching from the previous fight, pushing herself to the limit in an attempt to regain her focus and her strength. She trained harder than she ever had before, analyzing her own weaknesses, trying to understand what had gone wrong. She studied Kai's movements, his every gesture from the moment he stepped into the ring, his calm, his confidence. She realized, as she replayed the fight over and over in her mind, that it wasn't just his physical prowess that had been unsettling. It was his composure, his ability to stay in control no matter what. She had always believed that strength was about domination, about taking control of the fight. But Kai had shown her a different kind of strength, the kind that wasn't reliant on force, but on awareness. Sera wasn't used to this kind of vulnerability. It gnawed at her, threatening to unravel everything she had worked for. Determined to uncover the truth, she ordered a full investigation into Kai Voss. She wasn't the kind of person who relied on others to find answers, but this time she needed to know. Her security team dug through every available database, looking for any trace of the young fighter. But as the hours passed, the search turned up nothing. No records, no previous fights, not even a single mention of his name outside of the recent event. It was as if he had materialized out of thin air. Sera wasn't surprised. After all, if there was one thing she knew about the world she inhabited, it was that there were people, forces, beyond the reach of the established systems. People who existed in the shadows, outside the law, beyond the technological grasp of even the most advanced organizations. And Kai Voss, he was one of them. It was a few days after the fight when she finally tracked him down. A series of encrypted messages and hidden contacts, Sera found an address, one that led her into the deepest corners of the city, far from the gleaming skyscrapers and pristine corridors of the corporate headquarters. It was a small, run-down building nestled between two high-rise towers, its walls covered in layers of grime and rust. It looked abandoned, but Sera had learned long ago to trust her instincts. She knocked on the door, her heart pounding in her chest, not from fear but from something else, a kind of anticipation she hadn't felt in a long time. The door creaked open, and there he was, Kai. He didn't look like the fighter who had taken down a champion. There were no signs of arrogance or pride on his face. He simply looked human, normal. His clothes were casual, nothing like the flashy gear of an arena fighter, but there was a strange stillness in his eyes, something almost ancient, as if he had seen and understood. "You came," he said, his voice soft yet heavy with meaning. "I knew you would." Sera didn't hesitate. She stepped inside, the door closing behind her with a soft thud. "You've been avoiding me." "I haven't been avoiding you," Kai replied, his expression unreadable. "I've been waiting for you to come to me." Sera crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "You didn't answer my question before. What are you? Why did you fight me?" "Because you were ready," Kai said simply, his gaze steady. "You've always been strong, Sera, but you've never truly understood what that strength is." Her jaw tightened. "And what's that supposed to mean?" Kai's lips curled into a small, enigmatic smile. "It means you've been fighting the wrong battle."